In the Wild West, life was dangerous and often very unfair. Law and order were hard to maintain because towns were far apart and law officers were few. People had to find their own ways to control crime and keep order. Criminals faced some of the most terrifying punishments imaginable. Here, we'll look at some of the most brutal punishments of the Wild West. Hanging. Hanging was reserved for the worst criminals, like murderers or horse thieves. This punishment wasn't just about death, it was about making criminals suffer publicly. Once a noose was slipped around their neck, the condemned would be made to stand on a platform or cart, often knowing their final moments were drawing close. With a signal from the hangman, the trap door would open or the cart would be moved, and they would drop, causing the rope to tighten. If the drop was short, the person would dangle and writhe, struggling for breath for several minutes as their face turned red and veins bulged. They were left to die slowly, painfully choking in front of a crowd. Some hangings even left the body swaying in public for days, a rotting warning that no mercy would be shown to lawbreakers. Keel Hauling. Keel hauling, one of the most brutal punishments ever, involved tying the person with ropes and dragging them under a boat from one side to the other. The boat's bottom was rough with barnacles and sharp splinters. As they were dragged through, the sharp edges ripped into their skin, leaving deep cuts and sometimes tearing chunks of flesh off. The victim would often swallow mouthfuls of dirty water, choking as they were hauled along. Most didn't survive, and those who did were left scarred with open wounds that could easily become infected, leading to an even slower death. People who witnessed keel hauling knew it as one of the most horrific fates, sparking terror across the region. Burning at the stake. Burning at the stake was not only deadly, but was also filled with unbearable pain. The criminal would be tightly tied to a pole with wood or straw stacked around them. As the flames were lit, they would first feel the heat as it grew more intense. Fire would begin by burning their legs, slowly crawling up their body, causing an unimaginable level of agony as skin, muscle, and bone were burned layer by layer. For the person tied to the stake, there was no escape. The fire crept slowly, giving them time to feel every agonizing second of pain before the flames consumed their entire body. The sight and sounds of the burning person were intended to serve as the ultimate warning against breaking the law. Branding. Branding was a mark that criminals would carry for life, burned into their skin as a constant reminder of their crime. A branding iron, heated until it was glowing red, was pressed firmly onto the person's skin, searing it instantly. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, and the person could feel the hot metal biting into their body. The pain was unbearable, and the brand left a permanent scar that marked them forever. People with brands were often outcasts, avoided by others because their scars labeled them as criminals. Even long after the pain faded, the emotional and social suffering continued, as the scar was a constant reminder of both the crime and the excruciating punishment they had endured. Ear cropping and nose slitting. These punishments were designed to cause pain and shame. Ear cropping involved cutting off part or all of the ear. The pain of having cartilage sliced was intense, and the wound would bleed heavily, leaving the person dizzy and weak. Nose slitting was even more brutal, involving a deep cut across the bridge of the nose, which caused intense lingering pain and often led to infections. Both punishments left permanent visible marks. People with cropped ears or a slit nose were treated as outcasts, and the scars reminded them daily of their crime and punishment. Such marks would ache every time they looked in a mirror or felt the burning sting when it rained or the wind blew. Running the gauntlet. Running the gauntlet meant walking between two lines of people, each armed with sticks, rocks, or heavy fists. As the person moved forward, they were beaten from all sides, hit on the head, back, arms, and legs. Each strike was meant to hurt, leaving the person bruised, bleeding, and in immense pain. Some didn't make it through the entire line, collapsing from the overwhelming pain or even dying before reaching the end. Bones could be broken, skin torn, and injuries could lead to long-lasting pain. This punishment was both painful and humiliating, showing everyone that the person was at the mercy of the entire community. Even if they survived, they'd carry the scars, both physical and mental, for the rest of their lives. Whipping. Whipping was a common punishment and incredibly painful. Criminal would be tied to a post so they couldn't escape or shield themselves. The whip, made from tough leather, would be brought down hard on their bare back, splitting the skin with each lash. Blood would spurt with each strike, and the pain would grow as their back became a bloody mess of open wounds. The lashes weren't meant to kill, but to inflict as much agony as possible. The marks left by flogging took weeks to heal, often leaving permanent scars. Every movement hurt, making it nearly impossible to sleep or even breathe comfortably. Public flogging showed the crowd that crime came with severe pain, and everyone who witnessed it would never forget the horrifying screams. Tarring and feathering. Tarring and feathering was a mixture of pain and humiliation. Hot tar, heated to boiling, was poured over the criminal's skin. It burned deeply, causing intense pain as it melted into their skin. Feathers were then thrown onto the tar, sticking to the person, making them look ridiculous. The tar was almost impossible to remove and tore skin off when it finally came loose. Many people were left with burns that lasted for years, and the memory of the laughter and taunts from the crowd haunted them. The physical pain mixed with the shame made it a brutal punishment that left people scarred both inside and out. Stockades and pillory. Stockades and pillories were intended to hold people in uncomfortable positions for hours or days. The criminal would have their head and hands locked in wooden holes, unable to move or defend themselves. As they stood there, the crowd would gather to throw mud, rotten food, or even rocks at them, causing pain and humiliation. Hours in the pillory caused excruciating cramps and sore muscles, as the person was forced to stand in one position. People would mock them, laugh at them, and sometimes spit on them. While not deadly, this punishment was agonizingly uncomfortable, exhausting, and left the criminal feeling deeply ashamed and humiliated. Chain gangs. Chain gangs were forced labor punishments where prisoners were chained together and forced to do grueling work, like digging ditches, breaking rocks, or building roads. They had to work for long hours, often under a burning sun or in freezing cold. The chains were heavy and rubbed against their skin, causing cuts and blisters that would become raw and infected. Being in a chain gang was exhausting. If someone moved too slowly, they'd be beaten by guards. The lack of food and water made the work even harder, leaving prisoners weak and aching. Chain gangs didn't involve direct torture, but the endless days of harsh labor and the pain from heavy chains made it a brutal punishment that wore prisoners down mentally and physically. I hope you liked this video. Do subscribe to our channel and like this video for more videos like this.